This morning we are going to read two poems by Ezra Pound. One is A Pact, a Pact. This poem is about his relationship with Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman is, as you know, one of the greatest poets of the 19th century American poet. And his poetry is totally different from Ezra Pound, right? Very different. And Ezra Pound didn't like him. But as he grew older, he couldn't understand him. And this is a kind of poem that talks about his position in relation with Walt Whitman. And the other poem is about actually it's a translation of a Chinese poem. The poem was written by an emperor, and it's called Liu Ke. And actually, I think this is a new poem, and I like it very much. And I wrote an article about this poem and published it in a good journal. And we are going to read those two poems. And let's go back to the background. What kind of person, what kind of poet Ezra Pound was, okay? Ezra Weston Loomis Pound was an expatriate American poet and critic who was a major figure of the early modernist movement. His contribution poetry began with his development of imagism, a movement derived from classical Chinese and Japanese poetry, stressing clarity, precision, and economy of language. His best-known works include Riposte, Hugh Selwyn Mobley, and the unfinished one, a 20-section epic, The Cantos. And working in London in the early 20th century as foreign editor of several American literary magazines, Pound helped discover and shape the work of contemporaries such as T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, Robert Frost, Ernest Hemingway. He was responsible for the 1950 publication of Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and the let me see. More famous is the fact that Pound helped T.S. Eliot write The Wasteland, right? The Wasteland is probably the most famous, the most represented poem of the last century. T.S. Eliot became famous with that poem. And the original poem was much longer, and Pound cut it down to 2/3 of it. He deleted 1/3 of the poems, and this poem is actually is a mosaic, right? And the poem's notes, right, is longer than the poem itself. Do you know The Wasteland? Wasteland, right? Dorothy Shakespeare is interesting. Dorothy Shakespeare is a Ezra Pound's mother-in-law, right? Ezra Pound married Dorothy Shakespeare's daughter, I think, and Dorothy Shakespeare is the woman Yeats had an affair when he was young, and Ezra Pound became personal secretary to Yeats, and they lived in a cottage and worked together. And he served as personal secretary to Yeats. It's interesting, right? Dorothy Shakespeare. Imagism. His work. This photo. Yeats invited Pound to spend the winter of 1913 to 14 with him in Sussex, in a cottage, right? Okay. Arrest for treason. Okay. Translations, right? Pound's translations represent a substantial part of his work. He began his career with translations of Occitan ballads and ended with translation of Egyptian poetry. Okay. Pound's Fanasola translations, unlike previous American translators of Chinese poetry, which tend to work with strict metrical and stanzaic patterns, Pound created free verse translations. Whether the poems were valuable as translations contribute to be a source of controversy. Hugh Kenner, a great scholar, contends that Cathay must be read primarily as a work about World War I, but not as an attempt at accurately translating ancient Eastern poems. Okay, cantos, his work. Okay. Legacy. Okay, let's go to the poem. You remember the poem, two-line poem, metro, in a station metro, right? The apparition of these faces in the crowd, paddles on a wet black ball. You remember? Okay, let's go to the poem A Pact. Pact. I make a pact with you. I make a pact with you, Walt Whitman. I have detested you long enough. I come to you as a grown child who has had a pig-headed father. I'm old enough now to make friends. It was you that broke the new wood. It was you that broke the new wood. Now is the time for carving. We have one sap, one root. Let there be commerce between us. So, what do you think? Now he could understand Whitman, right? We have one sap and one root. Let there be commerce between us. Okay, and Liu Ke, another handout. Page 161. The first poem, Liu Ke. The rustling of the silk is discontinued. Dust drips over the courtyard. There is no sound of footfall. And the leaves scurry into hips and lie still. And she, the rejoicer of the heart, it is beneath them. What lip clings to the threshold? The rustling of the silk is discontinued. Dust drips over the courtyard. There is no sound of footfall, and the leaves scurry into hips and lie still. And she, the rejoicer of the heart, is beneath them. What lip that clings to the threshold? Can you read Chinese? Chinese? Okay. Chinese. Look at the Chinese, right? UK. Why don't you look at the rhyming? Ku, Sheng, Sheng, Mo, Zhong, Ji, Ning. Right? Sheng, Sheng, Zhong, Ning. I wrote this essay with the help of my Chinese student. There's a Chinese student, PhD student, and she is from China. And she helped reading this poem. Help with me. Help me with this essay, actually. Okay, Ezra Pound's Liu Ke and the Poetic Translation. Abstract. Ezra Pound's poem Liu Ke is a translation of Chinese poem, which is entitled Song of Fallen Leaves in Whining Cicadas. Pound's Liu Ke has become a new poem that incorporates this poetic theory. It is an independent, self-contained poem without reference to the original poem, Song of Fallen Leaves and Whining Cicadas. The paper investigates the original poem and the translation by looking into Chinese scholars' critiques and Zhao's and Pound's translation of the same poem. In translation, there is the problem of communicability between two languages, the original language and the target language. In prose translation, meaning outweighs form. The target language in this case focuses on transfer of meaning in the original, and the problem of literal equality in art in writing seldom surfaces unless the prose work is highly poetic. However, Pound's Liu Ke is not merely a literary translation. It is a creation of a new poetic work based on a Chinese poem, though Pound's knowledge of Chinese language seemed limited. It was likely that he read an English translation of the original Chinese poem. Pound was a good translator of poetry in several languages. And when he translated poetry, he tended to translate it freely, which turned out to be a very good one. Ezra Pound is one of the most important poets in the 20th century, and his being a poet outweighs his patronage of the writers of the last century. His role as a patron in literary circles is, however, well known. For T.S. Eliot, for Yeats, and James Joyce. Eliot's The Wasteland is a result of collaboration between Eliot and Pound. Without Pound, it would have been different or would never have been a representative poem of the last century. His influence on other poets was thus so great and changed them better and great. It is not equal to assume that this ability of his to ameliorate a literary work in a draft must have applied to what he had accomplished as translator of so many great classical works of the East and West, as Mingzi surveys what Pound has achieved in Pound as translator. Pound's Liu Ke is a translation, but it is also one of his own poems. Pound knew Chinese, but he might have been unable to read poetry in Chinese, as He Huang claims as below in this article discussing Pound's translation of the same poem. Mingzi mentions that Pound's Chinese remained rudimentary. When Pound saw a translation, just as he had been asked to look at The Wasteland, he must have seen a possibility of it being a great poem. To make a comparison, three of the poems are put together. First, Pound's Liu Ke, then H. Zhao's Gone. A translation of Liu Ke's poem. Finally, Liu Ke's poem, which is in Chinese, with the transcription of each word's Chinese pronunciation added by the present writer for the purpose of this study. The first poem, Liu Ke's. The rustling of the silk is discontinued. Dust drifts over the courtyard. There is no sound of footfall, and the leaves scurry into hips and lie still. And she, the rejoicer of the heart, is beneath them. What leaf that clings to the threshold? The next one is a translation by Charles. Go on. The sound of rustling silk is stilled with dust. The marble courtyard field, no footfalls echo on the floor. Fallen leaves in hips block the door. For she, my pride, my lovely one, is lost, and I am left in hopeless anguish tossed. In Chinese, Lu ye ye chan ke, lu mei ji wu sheng. Yu shi qi chen sheng, ji fang leng ji mo. Lu ye yi yu zhong zhong. Wang bi mei ji nu ji. Andikan wu jin shi wei ring ning. Is there a Chinese here? Can you read it? Okay. Why don't you read it? Okay. The Chinese, right? Okay. Okay. Very beautiful, right? Section 2. To have a point of reference, the original poem in Chinese discussed first, and then the two translate points by Giles and Pound. The two translations need to be compared side by side. Without Giles' initial translation, Pound wouldn't have made this poem, as he was not as good at Chinese as Giles was. But it seems that Giles was not as competent a poet as Pound was. As the two translators compared, translation of a poem from one language into another is an impossible task, unless the translator is a bilingual poet in both languages. But the fact is, Giles was good enough to translate a poem in Chinese, but not as good a poet as Pound. This is a problem, right? It will be of great help to understand the translation if we can understand the original work. So, we'd like to follow He Huang and discuss his article, Written Strategy in Ezra Pound, Translation of a Song of Fallen Leaves and Winding Cicadas. Huang offers three key elements in the Chinese poem to consider: the music, or the rhymes, the imagery, and the metaphor in it. First, music. The pronunciation of each word is transcribed to follow what he explains. I'll skip. The twice repeated exclamation G in lines 1 and 2 emphasize the powerful grief of emotional rise and fall in the poet. The last characters in lines 1 and 2, Sheng and Sheng, the pronunciation is the same. In Korean, they are different, right? Are rhymed. And the last characters, lines 4 and 6, Jing and Ming, are also rhymed. These four that end with the nasal sound, ong, produce sad, lingering affection. Then, wrinkling effect, right? Affection, right? Okay, affection is right. Then, Huang gives the metrical feet, wick stress for slash for strong accentuation, and X the wick one, and the this mark for the break. So wick strong wick break, wick strong, wick strong wick strong, wick strong, wick strong wick 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 strong, wick strong strong wick wick strong, strong pose wick 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 strong, wick strong pose strong wick strong wick wick strong. Musical, right? It's kind of musical. The first four lines are two parallel couplets, couplets, which flow well, but in line 5 there is a change in tone. But the fifth line again matches with line 6 with a slight difference. This abrupt change represents the poet's intense grief and inquietude. The imagery. Now let's go to the imagery. The poet Emperor Wu describes the dusty steppes, which were once clean, and the fallen leaves on the numerous doors to express the desolate scene in late autumn. The fallen leaves, Lu Ye, and numerous doors give a peaceful and still impression. The verb cling, Yi, breaks the impression, reminding the readers of death. The poet makes effective use of the image, which is still and in motion as well, to express his deep sorrow. Now let's go to the metaphor. In line 3, Emperor Wu uses Wu Zhu, as in the Zhu Huang Leng Jimo, which means two things. It means emptiness and loneliness. And what follows? Leng Jimo means both isolation and the grief that the poet feels keenly when he's left alone. In line 4, Yi means to rely, rest. Cling is this central word in sound, image, and meaning. It is soft, unrounded vowel representing the poet's fragile temperament, the inseparable attachment to each other, and the pain which the parting causes. Okay, section 3. Pound's translation is to be regarded as an independent poem, though he must have been exposed to Emperor Wu's original poem, Song of Fallen Leaves and Winding Cicadas, by way of Zhao's translational poem, Gone. Pound's poem is farther removed from Zhao's translation from the original poem. Zhao's translation and the original poem in general have some similarity despite the difference in Chinese and English. There is a difference between the original poem and Zhao's translation. Zhao's, according to Huang, changed the tactile sensation of temperature into an auditory sensation. Zhao's, for example, translate the empty house feels cold and lonesome. Zhu Fang Leng Jimo into no footfalls echo the floor. They change the meaning, right? The word echo well expresses emptiness and sadness, which is a good translation. In the following line, fallen leaves and hips block the door. To block up cannot express the original poem beauty and affection. Compared to Zhao's translation, Pound's translation is far away from the original, but Pound's difference is not a mistake or disregard of the original, but an enhancement of the original, which is a creative translation. The sensibility of the original writer and the translator interact in the creation of a new work of art. We have now come to Pound translation, Liu Ke's. Pound adapted many of Chinese poems contained in Herbert Zhao's History of Chinese Literature, published in 1901, and published Liu Ke's and others in De Imagist in the year 1914. And in April 1915, Pound published Cathay, a book of 14 Chinese poems, which can be regarded as the translation, his own poems as well. The full text is quoted again to have a whole picture. Liu Ke's poem. The rustling of the silk is discontinued. Dust drifts over the courtyard. There is no sound of footfall, and the leaves scurry into hips and lie still. And she, the rejoicer of the heart, is beneath them. What leaf that clings to the threshold? In this translation, Pound is an imagist poet. The point of view is like that of a moving camera lens. The auditory image in the first line, the rustling of the silk is discontinued, is followed by a visual image of dust that drifts over the courtyard. Then the third line combines the auditory and visual images. There is no sound of footfall and the leaves. The next line links the third line, which is a subject for the verb, scurry into hips and lie still. Lines 1 to 4 are continuous as in the original poem, as He Huang has demonstrated above. What is marvelous is how could Pound feel the sense of grief building up in the original poem without knowing the original poem in Chinese. And in the original poem, Pound mimics the music in the translation. Line 5 abruptly breaks the rhythm that has built up in a similar tone, but the final line goes back to the previous rhythm. Further, the image of beloved is emphasized, or the absence of her. And she, the resource of the heart, is beneath them. She is beneath the leaves. And the final line is a powerful ending to the poem and to the poet. It is metaphor and the little image of a what leaf. It is metaphor that represents his heart that sheds tears and is what? His heart still clinging to the departed. It is what leaf, cold and cruel, that cling to the stone of the threshold. Zhao translation has contributed to Pound making a great poem, which is a kind of unintended collaboration between translators. A good original has to wait for translators until it becomes a good piece, such as Pound's Lucage. Okay, we'll take 10 minutes break. Thank you.